Hello everyone, my name is Protesilaos, also known as Prot. In this video I want to talk to you about a collection of functions that I have extracted from my .emacs, which help me in my day-to-day experience with my favorite computing environment, Emacs of course. So what these do, these will simply extend or slightly modify the functionality of existing tools. These may be libraries that are built into Emacs or libraries, packages that are shared from the community that you can get from a package archive such as Melpa or GNU Elpa. So what I am about to show you here is small-scale workflows which together contribute to a more pleasant experience with Emacs. Pleasant is of course subjective. These are developed to be used by me and I like them, so therefore they deliver to an experience that I find good for what I want to do. That is aligned with my expectations and intuitions. So I have a file here which is with functions that I have extracted from my .emacs. I will share the entirety of this file. I will share it. I will include it below the video that will be posted on my website, below the post on my website for the given video. If you are watching this on the video hosting platform, I will provide a link for checking this, and from there you can also check my .emacs in case you want to see. As always, the code that is here will not be updated once it is posted on my website. What will always be updated is my .emacs. I always have stuff that I am working on, and I always keep it up to date. So let's start right away. One last introductory note. I am running outline minor mode, so these folding headings that you are seeing here, I talked about these in my previous video on the topic of outline minor mode and iMenu. So if you have not watched that video, please take some time to watch it as well and do yourself a favor and use outline minor mode and iMenu in your day-to-day work. It will simply be an upgrade. I am most certain about it. So let's start right away. The first thing I want to talk about is the Scratch package developed by Ian. The surname may be pronounced Jure, but I am not sure. At any rate, Ian has shared a very useful package which will simply produce a Scratch buffer for the major mode you are in. So my major mode was Emacs Lisp. The Scratch buffer is also Emacs Lisp. And what I have done here is simply create a small setup function which will just make sure that the name of the buffer has the word Scratch in it, and then the name of the major mode, and then it has a comment here at the top, as you can see. So nothing too fancy, just a way for me to be able, for example, when I am searching for buffers, to be able to find it right away. So simple and effective. That's very nice indeed. If you pass the universal argument to this command, it will prompt you for the major mode that you want to use. For example, I want Markdown, so you can see this is Markdown. Very simple, very effective. Thank you, Ian, for this extremely useful package. I use it all the time, and of course, because now you can create Scratch buffers on demand, you don't need to worry too much about searching or finding Scratch buffers. You just produce a new one and you are good to go. So that's the one thing. Let's move on to the next heading over here. Let me expand all the headings so that we don't have to do this over and over. Let's see, I have two functions here that I want to talk about. The first one is the ability to maximize the current window. This is a minor mode that I have defined, which is in large part, it's a modified variant of a command that exists in Pierre Neidhart's Windower package. So you may prefer to check Windower, but let's see this in action and you can judge for yourself. So I have this window over here, and what I want to do is I want to maximize the window, but make sure that I can go back to the configuration that I have before. Let's do it like this. So you see I have 3 windows. I want to focus in on this one, so I just press a key binding that I have for this mode. You can see that a letter M indicates that I am in monocle view, as tiling window managers call it, basically maximize the view. And if I do this again, I am back to the window layout that I was in before calling this command. Simple and effective, nothing more to talk about here. It just works. I have been using it for quite a while now, but it is only recently that I converted it into a minor mode because I think it works better to have this notification that the minor mode is active and things of that nature. Not much to talk about here. Let's move on. What is this? Okay, the ability to kill a window. Let's call again scratch buffer. If I press Super and K, it will just kill the buffer, no questions asked. If I do this again by passing a universal argument, it will also close the window, kill the buffer and close the window, and I am back to where I needed to be. Simple and effective. Again, let's not spend too much time on this and move on to the next item on this file, which is the various functions I have for marking syntactic objects, various constructs. So of course you may be already aware of the fact that Emacs has several functions for marking stuff. It can mark words, it can mark balanced expressions, it can mark paragraphs, and so on and so forth. But I found that some of these commands did not behave in a manner that I found intuitive or good enough for what I wanted to do. So what I have over here is, for example, let's start with a simple one, the ability to mark a whole word. By default, I don't have this command bound to a key anymore, but if you invoke the same command in Emacs, mark word, which is meta and the @ sign. So if you mark a word, it will simply mark from point till the end of the word, so like this, which I don't see the utility of this. So you would need to be at the beginning for it to match the whole word, whereas this one over here will simply work. And the reason I like this command, this is of course building on functionality that is built into Emacs. So the code is not really mine. My contributions are tweaks on the margin of its utility. So the good thing about this is that if you call it once, it will mark one object. If you call it again, it will increment the mark for the given object in the given direction. So if you are, for example, if you want to go backward, you can pass a negative argument and then call the command, and you can see how that works. That's very nice. But of course, it's not the ability to mark words that is here that we want to talk about, but rather the fact that you can mark balanced expressions. Of course, this exists in Emacs already, but I have added some more tweaks for it to work backward. And I have this do what I mean wrapper for all of those. So for example, let's say that I am here, this is a symbol. I hit the key binding that I have, Control Meta and space, and it marks the symbol. If I am here, it will mark the balanced expression. If I am at the end of the balanced expression, it will mark it backward. If I am over here and I keep hitting the key, you see it will increment the mark. Let's do it again. From here, you can see 1, 2, 3. Let's pass a numeric argument, for example 2, and then increment it again. You see how it works. So it's simple, it is effective. I have been using it for a while now. It just works. Once you get the hang of it, it is simple in its behavior. But to actually make it work, I had to browse the source code of Emacs and to configure the code. This is the code over here. So this is the code over here. This is a modified version of the built-in mark word that you see over here. and what I simply did here is to abstract it a bit so that it would work as a macro, and I added some more tweaks so that it would mark the whole word or the whole construct, the whole symbol or whatever, and then I have two functions that do what I want to do, and then the wrapper for all of them. Simple and effective. Of course, I know that there are packages that do similar things. There is, for example, expand region, but it is mostly meant for programmers because it has other kinds of expansion that, because I am not a programmer, I have no need for. I just tinker with Emacs Lisp, and because I want to configure Emacs, that's the only thing. It's not part of my work or anything, so I have no use for expand region. I just need this simplistic yet super effective thing that I have. So let's move on to workspaces. So I have to offer you an introduction here. This is about Emacs 27. These are built into Emacs 27, which introduces two notions of tab. The first one is called tab line mode, and this is the same principle as the tabs you are familiar with in your web browser or file browser or whatever, where each tab corresponds to a file or a web page, and you click on the tab, you move to the given web page. The equivalent in Emacs is for each tab to correspond to a buffer, so you click on the tab and you move to the given buffer. For me, this is not particularly useful because I have the ability to use regular expressions or fuzzy search or whatever to find the buffer that I am interested in. I have no interest whatsoever in a toolbar at the top that is littered with 100 buttons and I have to click and find what I am interested in. It's not efficient at scale, but of course it is a thing. You may be interested in using it. So that's tab line mode. The other one is called tab bar mode, and this one is more interesting in my opinion because this one implements a concept of persistent window layouts. So each tab is in fact a workspace, and this is something that you already know if you have ever used Emacs or Vim. I think Emacs calls it Windows and Vim calls it tabs as well. But the idea is that each tab corresponds to a window layout like this. So what I have is, what I'm about to show you now, is a do what I mean wrapper. Here it is, a do what I mean wrapper, which rather than having a toolbar at the top where I have to find the tab I am interested in, it will prompt me for a selection when there are multiple tabs. So actually, let me put this differently, sorry. If I have no tab and I call this command, it will create a new tab. If I have two tabs, it will simply switch between the two of them without any further questions. If I have multiple tabs, it will prompt me for completion. So now I have multiple tabs and I can see this already. So for example, I can search and I can go over here. You see these are two windows. This is Bongo, my music manager, and this is GNU's. So just for demo purposes, I hit the key again and I am here. As I said, if I have just two tabs rather, it will simply toggle between them, the equivalent of Alt Tab. I don't want to belabor the point too much here, it just works. But just to say that I disable the toolbar, the actual bar, I don't want to see that. I want a clean viewport. I don't like too many things calling for my attention. I want to be able to focus on the task at hand, but I very much appreciate the ability to have this abstract method for switching to a persistent window layout. So of course you can check this on your own and see for yourself. The reason I showed you this is because I am about to show you this command. This is for the built-in version control framework for Emacs. There is, of course, Magit as well. I have a couple of videos. You should check my backlog. One is an introduction to VC, the version control framework, which is very useful indeed. And the other one is, of course, an introduction to Magit, which is, as you all know, superb, so not much to talk about there. But what I want to do here is demonstrate this specific function over here. This specific function rather, which is, I will show it to you in action rather. Let's switch to a tab over here, and let me tell you what the problem is. A couple of weeks ago, I upgraded my Emacs build to the latest commit in the Emacs 27 branch. And I experienced a regression pertaining to the key map for eShell. And this was, of course, because some things changed and my configuration was out of date. So, of course, there was an incompatibility. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to fetch the git source of Emacs and then search for the commit that introduced the changes and then see what the logic of that commit was, what the scope of the change was, and then adapt things accordingly. So I didn't want to just go through the entire git log and search through all of it because, of course, Emacs is a massive project and it would be too cumbersome to go through the entire log. So what I wanted to do instead, so I developed this function ad hoc, as we say, for the task at hand, and then of course I refined it to work well in general. So let's say, for example, I have marked some files. It doesn't really matter which files, but I have marked these files over here, and I want to produce a log of commits for these three files. So I will simply call the function, and I have this log over here. Let's maximize it. Again, you see the M over here. I have maximized the window, and I can see the changes. I can see the commit over here. I can see the commit message. I can see the diff below it over here, so I can check right away what the change is about. I can move to the next commit and so on and so forth. You can see from the file names, you can see this is eShell mode, of course, esh mode if you will, and this one is mhist, and the other one is eShell.el. So you can see I have narrowed in on the files that I need to check, and I can go through the log over here. If I run this with a universal argument and then call the command, it will ask me for how many commits I want to limit the log to. So let's say I want to just see the last two commits. So I can see that this is one commit. Let me see, there is another. You can see there is only two commits in this buffer per my instructions. Very simple, very effective, and very nice. That's the one way to interact with this function, but there is another one. If you are in a file that is inside of a version-controlled project, you can call this command, and it will prompt you for completion, multiple completions, actually. So eShell, and let's do this one for this one over here. So you can see for those two files, I want to produce a log again. Let's see, you can see from the file here, over here, you can see that's one file, and then we have, where is the other? Let me see, let me maximize it. Why am I doing this? So you can see another file over here. Again, the same principle. Again, if I pass the universal argument, it will do what I want it to do, which is to limit the log. No need to belabor the point. You get the idea. You can check this on your own. And then I have this little thing over here, which will simply copy the commit log for, let's see it again. Let's do it like this for this one. If I hit W, it will copy just the commit over here, so I can reference it in a commit of my own, and nothing fancy, just a simple thing that works, and it's simple and effective. In the future, I may develop more of these, but always, as always, I develop functions to solve problems that I experience. So I don't try to figure out every possible edge case and then solve it. I do these as I go. So let's move on to diff functions. So I want to show you again a sort of do what I mean diff function. That's the gist of it. The others are mostly cosmetic. So let's switch to my, for example, to my Emacs file over here, and let's introduce. Let's introduce some changes. I have not saved the file. You can see that the file has not been saved. So if I call this command now, if I call it like this, it will show me the changes since the last time I saved the file. So you can see that the only change is those three lines over here, nothing more, nothing less. So let's remove this actually, and let's save it, and let's call the command again. Now the file is saved. So since there is no difference between the buffer and the underlying file, it will instead go and fetch the diff from the current file relative to the last git commit. So now you can see I can go through and check the log, the changes rather, that I have introduced since the last time I made commits to this file. And of course this is my .emacs, so there is always something that I have in the oven, as it were. So let's not spend too much time on this. You can check this on your own. There are a couple of other functions for producing word-wise refined diffs. Let me show it just for the sake of completeness. Word-wise diffs are those things over here. I can do it for the entire buffer or just for the given hunk. It doesn't really matter. This is mostly cosmetic. This is a wrapper around existing functionality. So let's move on to the next item on this file, which is the ability to insert delimiters and text headings. I haven't, so of course this is a live file. I will share it as I already explained. So let's start with the ability to insert delimiters. I know this functionality exists in built-in tools such as electric quote mode, I think, and it also exists in other packages. I think Smart Parens has a concept of this, and maybe other tools as well. But I am not a programmer. I don't deal with programming modes. I only tinker with Emacs, Lisp, so I don't really need all those bells and whistles. I need something simplistic, something predictable, something that I can configure and adapt to my evolving needs. So I have come up with this association list, which is then read by the following function over here. And this function simply leverages the built-in insert pair function. So let's see this in action. Hello world. I have this thing over here. Let's pass a negative argument and mark those two. You see the marking command I had before. So if I call now the command, the insert pair completion command, I am asked to, I am given a prompt, multiple to choose rather, for the delimiter I want. And you will notice that all of them have a unique identifier. So if I hit, you see I get one match right away just by hitting a single character. You can see how it works. Let's wrap this in parentheses. You see it works right away. Very simple, very effective. Let's add this in, let's do it like this, single quotes. So it works like this. I can pass a numeric argument. Let's add Greek style quotes. Of course, these are not just Greek style, but you know what I mean. So not too much to talk about here. It is simple, it is effective, it does what I want it to do, and I am happy and the world is at peace. So that's the one thing. And of course, it is also an excuse for me to experiment with association lists, with retrieving data from them, and things of that nature. So it's not just about writing a function that inserts delimiters, it's also about learning more as I go. So that's the one thing. The other is some predicates that I have over here for checking whether the line is empty, whether it starts with indentation, and things of that nature. And the reason I have these over here is because I developed a function simply to insert headings in plain text buffers. So let's see this in action. Text, let's see it in action. Let's focus over here. So this is the kind of thing that you would normally do. This is a heading. And this is the kind of thing you would normally do in plain text. So this is a heading, and this is a paragraph. For example, I forgot how to type. So this is a paragraph, and this one over there is a heading. So of course, I don't want to check the column count over here and then go to the next line, insert the count, and then insert the character. Or worse, do this one at a time. I don't want to do this. Instead, what I want to do is, this is a test, and I want to just hit a key. It will insert the delimiters, and then I can continue typing right away. It is very simple, very effective, and of course, if you pass a universal argument, it will produce a different style heading. So I used this again. As I said, I invent these things as I go. So I was writing the changelog for my modus themes. I published version 0.11 a few days ago, and of course I had to write a changelog. Of course, everything I write is comprehensive, so it takes a lot of time to write, and it needs to have headings and things of that nature, but it has to be in plain text so that I can also add it to the Git commit. So this is how I had to do it, and I came up with this function, simple yet super effective. So that's all there is to it, folks, with regard to these. Let's move on to advanced search methods. I have several of those. In this table, I document them. This is my .emacs, and you can find this table if you search a bit. Generic completion for projects and directory trees. So of course I have lots of functions. Some are for finding files, others for finding directories and files, files by name, files by contents, to grep in a given buffer, to grep in a given project. You get the idea. So what I want to do here is just show you a few of them, not all of them. Let's do, for example, let's see, well, I have it here. I just want to demo functions that I have shared with you here. So let's do this one for major modes. So I want to run a command for finding Emacs Lisp buffers. So not Emacs Lisp, buffers that match the major mode of the buffer I am currently in. So you can see that I have these buffers over here, and of course I can search with completion and switch to the buffer I am interested in. If I hit the universal argument and then call this command, it will produce an iBuffer with these, and of course I could mark these and work with them. I have produced a video on iBuffer, make sure to check it. iBuffer is a very useful tool, so make sure to incorporate it in your workflow. So that's the one thing. Of course, let's switch here. If I do with the letter V instead of B, it will give me completion for buffers that match the version controlled project I am in. So you can see this, how it works. Again, same principle, and of course with a universal argument it will switch to iBuffer. Let's do the same with directories. This is for directories, and just to say that some of these leverage external executables. For example, this specific one over here uses the fd executable, which is an alternative to GNU find. So for example, I want to search for something that matches Emacs and Vim. So I have 4 matches, 4 directories match this search for Emacs and Vim. If I pass the universal argument and call the same thing, I get a dired buffer. So you can see how this works. Let's go to that eShell buffer from earlier. Remember this thing over here? So imagine that I do this over here. I search, for example, for eShell, and I don't know, I complete. Would it give me anything for I complete? I don't know. It's not. Let's do this again for something that would match eShell and maybe org. Okay, you can see, so I have these directories, so I could produce a dired buffer out of these. So let's do it like this. So you can see I have a dired buffer. So then I could go, for example, here and do that marking and then producing a git log for those items. You can see how you can mix and match those things into more, into emergent workflows. That's the beauty of these. And of course, let's do the same for words, for files or directories. And you can see that now I only have one that matches the contents of files. Let's do it Emacs and Vim rather. Emacs and Vim. You can see now I have 23 results for files and directories, whereas if it were just for directories, I have 4 results. Again, same principle, you pass the universal argument, it produces a dired buffer. And of course, if it is, let's do it with files and directories. If it is a directory such as this one, and I hit the return key, it switches to a dired buffer. You see this is dired, but of course the same search, if you hit on a file, it will switch to the file. Of course, vimrc is there in case disaster strikes and I no longer have access to Emacs. Otherwise, it is completely useless, but that's beyond the point of this video. So I have lots of those. You can browse them on your own. You can check my.emacs for those, and they all start with the prefix meta s, and this is because I consider these advanced searches. For example, there is the built-in occur, mx occur, which is bound to ms and then o, meta s and then the letter o, and of course I use this to develop my own little extras. And that's all there is to it, folks. That's what I had to talk about. You can see how I am able to do stuff that are not built into Emacs, but which are fairly easy to implement, because again, I don't want to keep repeating this, but it's important because this is not my job. I am not a programmer. I have not been trained to do this. And the fact that I can just write some eLisp to do what I want, to make my computing environment behave in a manner that I find intuitive, this is wonderful indeed. And this is what I want to conclude with. I have been using Emacs for a bit more than a year now, and of course I had zero knowledge of Emacs Lisp, and I started Emacs from scratch, vanilla Emacs as they say. I didn't want to mess around with frameworks, distros or whatever, not because they are bad, but because I consider them impediments to learning. For me, the way to learn is to start from zero, with zero expectations, start reading the manual, start working your way one step at a time, and progress the way a turtle progresses, which is one calculated step at a time. It doesn't really matter. You will always get where you need to go, and that's what I have been doing for the past year or so. And finally, I just want to say that some of these, as I said, exist in other packages, so you may say, why bother reinventing the wheel? For example, those advanced searches, why not use, for example, the Ivy completion framework or Helm? They already have those, they have it, they are better in every way you can imagine, which I do not question. They are better, but it does not matter. What matters is that by trying to reinvent the wheel, I put my mind to solving a given problem, and in doing so I learn something new which I can then use. I can use that newfound knowledge to develop something that was not possible with my prior knowledge. So the fact that I may be reinventing the wheel is not a bad thing in my books. It's actually a good idea to reinvent the wheel the whole time, because in doing so you are not actually reproducing what already exists as stock of knowledge, but you are rather internalizing lessons that you were not aware of prior to trying to solve those problems. So rather than look at it from a negative perspective, try to see the didactic value of reinventing the wheel. So that's all I had to say today, folks. That was my demo. It's really warm here. It's summer, and of course things are getting a bit too difficult. So as I said, I will share this file over here, the entirety of it. I will add it in the post that will include this video on my website, protesilaos.com, and of course there you can also find my .emacs, protesilaos.com/.emacs, but everything will also be linked to from the video hosting platform. Check the description. So that's all for now, folks. Thank you very much for your attention. Goodbye.